Hello, everyone, and welcome to yet another episode of Marketing Blueprint. I promised before that there would be great marketing leaders. I promised that we would be talking communication. Guess what? Today, I have the king of communication with the one and only 𝗪𝗵𝗁. Tom, welcome to Marketing Blueprint. Thank you for accepting my invite. How are you doing today?
William, it is wonderful to see you. It's been too long. Delighted to be here.
It has been.
I describe myself as the king of communications, but I'm delighted to be here.
You would not say that, but I would. So that's
your privilege.
That's the thing I can do. However, inviting Mr. Murphy, I had to face Murphy's Law, and the virtual background just doesn't work today. But that's okay because everything else is going to be perfect. So no pressure.
I bring Murphy's Law with me everywhere.
That's even the name of your blog. So for people who actually want to look into it, there is a little blog out there with a few pieces of personal beliefs and everything that can be found on the internet. We've got a tradition on Marketing Blueprint, which is to start with a guest's background and career to contextualize everything that comes after. So if that's okay with you, I'd like to start with that, and feel free to correct me or add anything that's missing.
Of course.
All right. So you actually started as Director of Public Relations at Iona Technologies. You've been GM PR Services at Tex100. You've been Director of Corporate Communication at Cape Clear Software, which I believe happens to be just a spin-off of Iona Technologies. That
a lot of common DNA, yeah. They were bought by Workday eventually.
Exactly. And you've had what I would say an incredibly successful career at Microsoft, where you moved from head of PR and social responsibility for Ireland, all the way to head of global communication in the US in the span of roughly 15 years. And that's when you decided to move your career from the beautiful island of Ireland all the way to America. Then you've been VP Communication at RingCentral, and you're now VP Communications at Veeam. Is that a good description?
It's close. I started my career on the PR agency side with Tex100, so back as a graduate, and then moved to client side into Iona Technologies. Microsoft, I didn't actually run global communication for Microsoft. Microsoft's a very large company, but I ran global communications for their services business, so professional services, support, stuff like that. So not the whole of Microsoft. I wouldn't like to put that forward. But I did a lot of interesting things there over the years. It was a good time. It's a good summary. It's varied. I started off, as I said, on the agency world, learned about the basics of communication and marketing there, which was a great learning process for me. And then got to a point where I wanted to move in-house and work in-house and work through a load of startups, some other more mature companies before ending up with Microsoft. Really because I hadn't worked in-house at a large brand, and I thought that was a good opportunity. Worked with Microsoft in Europe for about 4 years, and then was asked to move stateside to Seattle to work in their corporate affairs team in the US. And then from there, worked with on Windows and Office, and ended up in services, and then moved to RingCentral after about 15 years, which is remarkable length of time, because I originally went in for 2 years, but ended up there 15. And then I moved to America for 2 years, and I've ended up here 15. So, yes, plans aren't always perfectly executed, I would say.
So let's talk about plans. You've been in communication for most of your life. You started on the agency side. Why are you working in communication? Was it a plan from day one where you woke up as a kid in your bed dreaming about communication and wanting to be there? Or is it just because your first job happened to be in an agency and you thought, oh, that's actually not bad. Let's continue and see where it leads?
Yeah, I think your career changes as you go through it, and what you want to do changes as you go through it. You learn an awful lot. I wouldn't say I had a big central plan I've been executing against my career. I'd say I've had many plans. It's interesting. When I left school, I had no idea what I wanted to do. I didn't want to do science or medicine or law. I honestly didn't. It didn't interest me. So I thought business would be a great thing to do. So that's why I did it. And I thought, well, I don't really want to do accounting, so maybe marketing would be a good place to start. It's kind of a general business degree. It opens up opportunities to do different things in business. And when I graduated, I really didn't know what I wanted to do, but I did know there were two things I did not want to do. I did not want to do work in public relations, and I didn't want anything to do with computer companies. And the reason for the public relations was there was a TV program on at the time called Absolutely Fabulous, and I just hated how it portrayed PR. I said, that is just not me. And tech, I just, at the time, this was back a long time ago when it was all DOS commands, and it just felt awful. And I've spent my entire career doing PR for technology companies. So I'm not a great person to give career advice out of college. What I would say is, there's very few people who know what they want to do when they graduate. And so keep an open mind. One of the best pieces of career advice I got, and I got it way too late because I got it a couple of years ago, and it was the horse and bolted at that point, was a mentor of mine said, when you come out of college, think about your career horizontally, not vertically. So get different life experiences, try different roles, experiment with different experiences. Because his point was, if you go vertical into a career, then you hit a ceiling very quickly. If you go horizontally, one, it gives you a whole set of different life experiences, and you might find something that you didn't think you'd love. And by the way, I love doing communications for technology companies, but I never knew I wanted to do it. And I would say I did the opposite. I took a very vertical path. And so when you think about career plans, when I was in the agency, there was a very well-defined career path. You started as an account executive, you learned the basics, you moved into an account manager role where you were actually allowed to touch the client and talk to the client and work with the client. Then you became an account director, so you ran that part of the business, and then you became a general manager. And when I started, I was very focused on getting up that path. I think as everyone is. But then that changes over time, right? Then other things become more important to you. So my career path has moved and shaped, and I'm at a different place now than I was 10 years ago, and a different place 10 years ago.
You just said, I love working in communication for tech companies.
Yeah.
Tech companies.
Sorry, I know that might be, but I do.
But so here is the thing. Working in tech companies, they are probably that's probably the industry with the fastest growth, with the most innovation in a way. But B2B tech ain't exactly the most sexy type of business and communication. Why not? I don't know. You know, when you start in marketing, you always study the war between McDonald's and Burger King communication. Sounds more fun, more sexy. Why tech companies? And was it important? Because you just said that in your early days, you didn't want to do tech and you didn't want to do PR. That's exactly where you landed, and you seem to love it. So is it really important to be in something that's sexy, that's appealing to you at the beginning of your career? Should that be part of your choice?
I used to feel that was the case, and now I believe that is not the case. So let me take a couple of things. When you say consumer is sexy, I think it depends on how you define interesting things in your career. Like for me, being creative often for people is about tactics. They think about being creative executions, and that's very much a consumer thing. But for me, the most powerful creativity is in strategy. Can you do a creative strategy that will absolutely drive better results? Now, you also want to be creative on the execution side, but creating creative strategy, and you can do that in tech with tech companies because the market is changing all the time. And you're encouraged to experiment, try different things. That's fascinating. It's absolutely fascinating. And for some people, absolutely consumer is where they want to be. But I found business to business tech, and I've done consumer tech as well, but business to business tech, the market dynamics, the changing nature of the technology, how the markets shift, how new players come and go. It's fascinating. It's really, really fascinating. So that's why I found that interesting. In terms of chasing, you know, I think there was a part of my career where I chased the big new brand. I want to work on a bigger brand. I want to work on a global brand. But when I got those roles, I found the work wasn't as interesting. It was more about managing the brand rather than building the brand, because the brand was built. So therefore, you have to manage the brand. And I found that intellectually a little bit less interesting. And so I discovered that really what I want to do is go where the work is interesting. And so it doesn't matter what the brand is. It doesn't matter what the market segment is. If the business is interesting, the industry is interesting, there's interesting dynamics going on, that makes for a really fulfilling career. And your work is a huge amount of your life. I always say that the first Monday morning I wake up and go, oh, I really don't want to go into work today. That is my mind telling me it is time to do something different. And I've always abided by that. So, I bounce out of bed on a Monday morning. I love work. I love getting into work. I probably work too much. But I find it intellectually stimulating. I work with great people. And I work on interesting things, interesting problems. So, for me, B2B tech is fantastic. And I've worked in all areas of B2B tech, from communications to operating systems to apps to infrastructure to enterprise development. They all have their own interesting elements and dynamics.
But the dynamics are changing, aren't they? I mean, the past 3 years, you can't open a single website or newspaper without the tagline being about AI. And how AI is replacing people, changing the way we work, writing everything you see on LinkedIn, changing, building content on your behalf. How is that affecting the communication sector? And most importantly, what is the impact on people's career? I mean, today, someone starting a career in communication, is AI a threat, or is it a tool that you're going to have to learn and use? Or how do you see that in the way you're working today? And most importantly, for newcomers.
One of the reasons I love working in communications is it's always changing. One of the most valuable skills you have as a communicator, particularly in tech, but other industries as well, is a growth mindset. You always want to be learning new things, trying new things, exploring new things. Being inquisitive is a huge advantage. Look, if I look at when I started in communications, people got their news from a newspaper, the radio, TV, maybe a networking event. That was it. It was very simple. Now, compare that to now, where it's completely fragmented, where everything has changed, where the technology has changed. Researching a new business pitch when I started working meant getting in your car, driving to the local business library, having a bag of coins so you could feed the photocopier to photocopy information in the library. That's true. That's not science fiction. That was how I started my career. And actually, if there was a competitive pitch going on, other agencies would be in there and they'd be moving the files around so you couldn't find them. I mean, it was hilarious. Compare that to now. It's night and day. So you've always got to change, and through email, through social media, through SEO, and now AI, right? So it's always changing. And no one really knows where AI is going to end up. There are threats, but it will also create new opportunities for people to do amazing things, right? We're already using AI. It does reduce a lot of the kind of humdrum activity. It does make it easier to process data. It does make it easier. It makes it better to, test your messaging, to brainstorm, to analyze data, to get insights from that data, which is more important than the data itself. So right now, I see it as more of a productivity tool. It's still not very integrated end to end, and I think until it's integrated end to end, then we'll start to see where it impacts people. But yeah, everyone needs to lean in on AI. It's super important, and we got to understand it, and we got to learn about it, and we got to try it and experiment with it. Content marketers are now thinking, well, okay, how do I start to engage with generative LLMs, right? Because if people are searching for a topic that's relevant to my employer, how am I making sure that our content, our positioning, our messaging is landing? I mean, it's changing for everybody. But that change has been constant through my career. And it's impacted everything from how you launch a product, how you manage issues, everything. And so that growth mindset, always thinking, learning, trying new things, challenging yourself, I think that's vital in communications and marketing. Marketing is getting just as impacted by this as communication. So to me, it's fascinating.
I'd like to get back to something you said a few minutes ago, where you said the best career advice you ever got was to go horizontal and not vertical. And you meant horizontal in terms of roles and scope and what you can learn. What about industries? For someone like you who's been in the same, generally speaking, tech industry for the past many years, is it important your advice, would it be to stay in the same industry because now you're super expert, you know everything about this topic, and it's very hard to find someone who knows more than you and be replaced? Or is it actually better to start with an industry and try another one and try many things the same way you do it horizontally versus vertically when it comes to the job responsibilities?
I would say try many things. I would say the idea of staying in one place intellectually, you want to try different industries, you want to try different verticals, you want to go back to different industries. You know, back in the, not to age myself, but back in the late 90s, one of my big clients that I worked on globally was a storage company. And now I'm back in the data business now. It's a completely different business, but it's the same industry sector. So I think getting broad experience across different industries, because even in B2B tech, you know, the world you know on business-to-business communications, cloud communications, is very different from the world of operating systems, or the world of search engines, or the world of enterprise apps, right? It's a very, very different world, very, very different dynamics in the market, different influencers, different competitors, different analysts. The whole industry is different. So for me, that horizontal approach to your career, I think it applies to industries, I think it applies to life experiences, I think it applies to marketing roles. The more breadth you have, I think it gives you more perspective to bring into the work you're doing. The other thing I'd say, this is specific for communications people, I'm a huge fan of communicators both having experience on the agency side and in-house. Because while the role of a PR person in-house and agency, there's a lot of similarities, there's also a lot of differences. And you can tell pretty quickly if someone hasn't worked on both sides of the house, because they lack a lot of empathy and understanding on what the in-house person is dealing with, and vice versa. The in-house person doesn't have the empathy of what the agency person is dealing with. So I'm a big fan, even in communications, of trying different angles on the industry and getting different experiences and perspectives.
So getting different perspectives in terms of scope, in terms of industry. What about location? When I look at your background, a few years ago, you decided to make the big move from Ireland to the US. And I believe that was a career choice, because I guess you probably reached the maximum you could go, that glass ceiling that you could get in Ireland, and then you had that bigger job in the US. And looking back, it looks like it was the smartest choice, because looking at your career, you've been able to do things you probably, I'm guessing, wouldn't have been able to do in Ireland. Is that true for anyone? If you've got that opportunity of someone from the Silicon Valley or the US in general knocking on your door, and you're somewhere in Europe, should you actually make that move? Is that the right move to make?
I think it's incredibly rewarding to work around the world in different environments, because the world is very different. The media environments around the world, the working environments, the competitive challenges, the infrastructure, it's just so different around the world. Now, I will say I was very lucky. My career coincided with the tech industry in Ireland really exploding, and a lot of companies putting their European headquarters into Ireland. So a lot of the work I did was not just in Ireland, it was across all of Europe. And then when I moved in-house, I started doing effectively US PR based in Dublin, and spending a lot of time traveling back and forth between Ireland and the US, working. So maybe a week a month for 4 or 5 years, I was coming over to the US and then going back. So I had exposure around in Asia, in EMEA, in America, pretty much all through my career, and I've been blessed on that front. But yeah, moving to the US was great. It was a great experience. And then I was taking on global roles in the US. So it wasn't just US. I was also still getting to work in Asia, to work in EMEA, and then work in the US as well. Having that perspective, like any experience, makes you a better professional, no question. And don't worry about it. You know, when we thought about moving to America full time, myself and my wife had thought about it a few times. And we said, look, we'll go for 2 years. We'll see how it goes. If it doesn't work, we'll go back. There's nothing lost. 2 years is no pace of time. And if it works, great, we'll stay there. And we actually had plans to go back after 2 years. But yeah, still here 15 years later. So.
Something else that I believe has shaped your career, but I may be wrong. I'll see what you say about it.
Yeah.
I believe you've been able to find the right people. You've been able to find the right leaders to follow, the right leaders with whom to build trust and to build professional, efficient relationships. I'm talking especially, obviously, about Anna Neswaran, who is a current CEO of Veeam, but worked with you in Microsoft, worked with you at RingCentral as well. is it just sheer luck, or is it something you've been actively building? And is it something that everyone should be trying to build? Is it finding the right, the right mentors, the right leaders, and following them? Is it actually a key to successful careers?
It's a great question, and I think the answer is multifaceted. There's always luck involved in how your career goes. You cannot plan everything. Some things happen, and how you react to them is going to drive an outcome for you. So luck is always involved. A wise woman once told me that you should build your network before you need it. And so start thinking about your network. No matter what age or what experience you have, you need to build that network out. I will say, people, for me, is critical. It's absolutely defining whether I take a role or not. It's based on the people I'm going to work with, the leaders I'm going to support. Because I want those people to, one, value communications, and two, have the same values that I have, and that's critical to me. I won't take a role without it. I will say, I've worked with many people who didn't share those values or didn't value communications through my career. I spent many years like a lovelorn teenager trying to change them. They'll change. They'll understand the value of communications. It'll all be good. And I always found they never did. And it was a soul-destroying experience. And so I got to a point in my career where if the company doesn't inherently value communications, I've no interest in trying to educate them on that. You just can't change what people think is important. So for me, it's critical that the management team, the executive team, value communications and give communications the opportunity to do its best work by challenging what we've been doing before. I think finding leaders who you believe in is critical, because at some point you have to stand over what you're working on and where you're working and what you're doing. And so those leaders become critical, excuse me, in that experience. So as I've got more experience, I have worked with people who I go, yeah, this is a leader I can really dedicate myself to supporting. They're aligned with me. I want to work with them. And I think that you have to go through a various set of experience to find those people. And when you find those people, you want to make sure that you're connecting well with them and staying in touch with them and adding them to your network. And so I'm very lucky. I consider myself very lucky. Yeah, a lot of the leadership team at Veeam I know very well. I know that they put value into communications. I know how they are as people. I know how they treat people. I started my career in the 90s, and it was a very different environment. Managers did not necessarily respect employees. It was very hairy, like physical altercations happened in the workplace. Like it was crazy. When you look back, it was crazy. So yeah, I think finding the right people. I'm also, as you can tell from my beard, I'm getting old. I'm not willing to put up with bad behavior. I'm very privileged to be in a position where if someone's unpleasant, I'm really not going to waste my time with it. Now, that comes from experience, and that comes from being in a position where you can do that. Not everyone has that. And even when you have a bad manager, you learn a lot through that process. And I'm overwhelmingly good managers, but I have had some really, really bad managers. And I've learned through that process. It was painful, but I learned about it, and I got more mature, and I, identified things I wouldn't put up with in the future. So everything is a learning experience. I think that comes back to the growth mindset. Even bad experiences, you can take learnings from them and get better.
So talking about working with executive teams, one thing I've probably heard you say 500 million times is the magic recipe to thought leadership. There are two ingredients in thought leadership. There is having thoughts and having leadership. Which, when you become an exec, you need to have thoughts, because that's your company. If you don't have a strategy, if you don't have a place to go, then there's probably a bigger problem than thought leadership. And you need to have leadership because, well, as an exec, you're a leader. Now, when you start your career, you may have thoughts of your own. You may or may not have leadership yet. Do you have to start communicating early in your career? Do you have, now we live in a world where everyone can have TikTok and self-record and have 500 million views about talking about anything and everything, and everyone understand that if you want to have more views, you need to be more controversial. Do you need to have an opinion on everything when you want to build your career, or is it better to keep your head down and focus on your work? How is, personal branding, opinions, communication, how does it play a role in building your career, especially when you're starting?
I think you have to be thoughtful, right? I think we all have opinions. Everyone has an opinion. Just some people share them very openly and some people don't. And I think as a communicator or a marketer, you need to be thoughtful about what you're communicating on. There's no point ranting and raving and just coming up with controversial points of view just to try and get some clicks or get some awareness. In the long term, for me, that does not work. It's like when you see in a social media profile, my content does not reflect the thoughts of my employer. Well, it does. It does. You putting a disclaimer on your blog does not change that, or your TikTok account or whatever you're doing. But it does impact your employer. People do connect the two. So you have to be thoughtful. I think where it becomes useful is if you're exploring new technology, new outlets. When blogging came along, the best way to try and experiment was blog. Let's get out there and do some blogging. I blogged for many years. Now I really don't do blogging anymore because I just don't have the time, and I just don't have the time. But so you need to be thoughtful. I think using those channels to learn about them, what works, what good content looks like. I think that's a very, very wise thing to do. But you need to be thoughtful. You have to be thoughtful. You just can't rant and rave about stuff because the internet never forgets. And so that's hard, because sometimes we all want to rant on things, and you just have to say, no, I'm not going to rant on that topic. I'm going to hold my thoughts to myself. And, even today, like this, I think last week I saw something that I really wanted to rant about public relations. And I was like, well, it doesn't serve any purpose. It makes me feel better when I hit publish. But after that, it's just going to come back, and it's not constructive.
So if today I wanted to apply for a job to work for the great 𝗵𝗵𝘁, what would be the one skill that I would have to have, regardless of the actual role and scope and everything? What are you looking at when recruiting people? What is a one soft skill or attitude, or what is it I need to do to convince you I'm the right person that you want to work with?
That's such a hard question because it's never one thing, right? And so as I build teams, what I found over the years and through experience, and this is specific to communications, with communications, there's rarely a right and a wrong answer, right? There are better answers and worse answers, but it's not binary. There isn't right and wrong. And so therefore there's nuance, which is always difficult. And so the most effective communication teams I've ever worked on or been part of or managed have very different personalities because they all bring different perspectives to the discussion. Now, at some point, someone needs to make a decision, but having different points of view around the table that can come together and shape and challenge an idea and make it better, that is critical for me. So I just hired a new person in Europe. They're amazing. But one of the things that really jumped out in their interview was they had a point of view. They were willing to share that point of view in an interview. Now, there's risk in that because if the interviewer doesn't share my view, that diverse perspectives are important, it could be damaging in your interview. Or if someone disagrees with your point of view, and we actually had a disagreement in the interview, and I thought, you know what? If she's willing to challenge me in this interview, she's going to be a great addition to the team. Now, he also has a whole array of other really awesome skills that made her the best candidate. But that was one that jumped out because we get better through discussion and agreement. The worst comms teams I've worked on or been part of are the teams where it's groupthink. Everyone's thinking the same thing, everyone's doing the same thing. Because your audience isn't doing and feeling the same thing. And really comms comes back to the audience. Where are they finding information? How are they thinking? What are they doing? How are you going to reach and engage with them? So you want diverse opinions. You want diverse perspectives. It's vital. Absolutely vital.
I had one last question for you, but I feel you kind of answered it already in your intro, which is if you had one single piece of advice for someone starting their career today, besides going horizontal and not vertical, would you have another piece of advice for people starting their career and want to be a Tom Murphy?
I have one. So we talked earlier about how you don't know what you want to do when you leave school. And it's really, I remember it being a really tough thing for me. I really didn't know. And so one piece of advice I got once, which I thought was great, was do what you're good at. Even if it's not the sexiest thing in the world, do what you're good at. Because if you're good at something, you will love doing it. Because you'll advance in your career, you'll get recognition for the fact that you're good at it. So find things you're good at. Don't just find things you enjoy, find things you're good at. And everyone has different skills, frankly. So that would be my little nugget of advice. What are you good at? Go try that out and see if it turns into a career for you. And then you'll never work a day in your life. If you love what you're doing and you're enjoying it, and you will if you're good at it, that's the best way to build a career for you.
What a beautiful way to end today's interview. Tom, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for your insights and your wisdom. I hope that was insightful for everyone. I will see you guys next month for yet another interview. Please feel free to reach our friend Tom's LinkedIn to find out more about his career and how you get to the king throne. Thank you, Tom.
Julian, a pleasure as always. Great to see you. We'll talk soon.
Bye.